Well, there we go. All right. I believe we are live. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome. I'm going to kind of keep it open here. We're going to see if see who joins us by looking at our kind of our attendee list. Looks as we're watching kind of folks jump on right now. Thank you for those who are online already. Interested in getting some of your participation today. So today is this webinar is more of a panelist approach, right? I have some really talented people who are joining us today, and we're just going to have an open, candid conversation about the topics. So today, this is FPSA is beginning their kickoff series of it's a fall leader operations series, and today it's about project management. We're calling it a workshop, but it's more of a panelist discussion, right? We're trying to engage industry leaders and design build experts, OEMs, we have one with us, and food manufacturers explore best practices in project management. So some of the things we're going to talk about is learn how to streamline project execution, minimize delays, and maximize success. And that's what we wrote, right? That's what we wrote out as the topics. But I do have some great panelists with us today. So first I want to thank Burns McDonald. They are the sponsor for today. And we actually have someone from joining us. So I'd first like to welcome Heath Clifton, who is from Insight Solutions. He's the Director of Automation and Controls. That is son of we'll call him our OEM guy, because they deal with material handling, robotics, automation, blending, conveying, hoppers, loaders, etc. Right? So they're on that side of the business. And then we have Jimmy Jenkins from Burns McDonald, who is a construction project manager, and also he dressed up for us today, wearing construction attire. We thank you for that. And then Mary Frances Stotler, who's from the Dennis Group, and she's also a construction project manager, but she's got a much longer title. We'll let her maybe address that. So we do have two great design build groups. My name is Ben Reeder. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing for the Weber Smith Group. And so we are on the A&E sides. We're our engineer and architects. So we kind of all come together for this. So today, I'm just going to kind of start with a question, and then kind of lead into that. So, Mary Frances, why don't you start off? I'm going to say, how do you approach the initial planning phase of a project, and what are the key elements you focus to ensure a strong project?
Yeah, no, that's a great place to start, Ben. I really think it first starts with defining the overall success criteria for the project, making sure everyone agrees, what does success look like and what does done look like on a project. So it's hammering out those scope responsibilities, clarity of roles and responsibilities. And I think one of the areas where that can get muddy and making sure you're really clear there is on operational startup. When is the client taking over? What's the OEM doing? What's the design builder doing? Making sure those roles and responsibilities are clear. And once you have that success criteria defined, then it's defining overall project approach to meet that success criteria, which, I'm always going to be a proponent of design build. This is the design build network. And I think a lot of that is educating clients on what does design build mean and why that execution methodology is superior, faster, cheaper, higher quality, single source solution. And I think part of that, education of design build is also getting those key stakeholders involved early so you can build that partnership. If there's critical OEMs that you're using, making sure they're involved in the process early, the client, the design builder, making sure that you have all of the critical parties at the table at the very beginning, so everyone agrees on those success criteria at the beginning. And then once you're aligned on the project approach, you're aligned on the success criteria, the definition is really a process of going wide, not deep. You're not developing anything in detail, but you are touching all the areas of scope. So you really can give the client an overall picture of what's the scope, what's the schedule, what's the budget, and always circling back to make sure scope, schedule, and budget are supporting those success criteria laid out. So Jimmy, what are some areas, I know you've been doing this a long time too. What are some areas where you've seen upfront planning significantly impact a project's success?
I think that's a great question. One of the biggest things we try and preach and practice in our work is bringing construction in early. It's easy as engineers to sit there and design and feel good and come up with the perfect solution, but without construction input and feedback, whether it's your subs or your own construction group, your partners, you're probably going to miss a lot and come up with a genius solution that you can't actually build. So one thing that jumped out to me, we recently had one where we had a giant heat exchanger to get up on a roof, and actually brought in our local crane partner and team early, and it dictated where that thing went on the roof. We would have happily put it 500 feet away from the edge of the building and not been able to put it there in the end. So having that feedback early on constructability and modularity even can not only do cost, but make sure you can actually do the whole thing. I think obviously at that point, we're talking, a lot of like stakeholders and stuff. You've got, in our case, the design build partner, you've got OEMs, you've got the owner, you've got the subcontractors, etc. And trying to communicate between them all, just with all those different players, can be key. Heath, I guess from your side, coming from the OEM side, you got any recommendations for communication strategies that would be effective to help manage all those different stakeholders?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd go back and touch on something Mary Frances said, at the very beginning of the project, really educating people on design build. As an OEM, we work with different design build groups. Everybody has their own flavor of how they, want to go through a project. So really setting those, like you said, getting those stakeholders in early, setting up who's communicating with who gets to talk to those people. So really, if your communication strategies, just get everybody involved from the start. As an OEM, we want to be able to talk to the end user. We had an example. We were working with a design build. They really didn't want us talking to the end user, which, at the end of the day, when we put the equipment in, there were some things the end user was saying, hey, why didn't we get these things that we asked for? As the OEM, we're looking at them, we're like, we didn't even know that was an option. And honestly, it probably would have been easier for us, had we communicated that. So, up front, like you guys said, getting everybody involved, getting the OEM involved, communicate as much as you can. I know, Jimmy, I'm sure you've had some, misunderstandings for communications and things. If you have any thoughts on that, or how you guys have approached that in the past?
Yeah, we have had plenty of misunderstandings, and probably also had OEMs not involved with the owner, even though we probably should have. I think there's a couple different things I recommend there that have helped a lot. Knowing your stakeholders and keeping track of those throughout the project is a big thing. I know especially with our owner side, they've got a lot of players. You've got plant teams, corporate teams, FSQ teams, whatever. Everyone's got different opinions, motives, needs, whatever. The biggest thing I'd recommend, we call it a RACI matrix, but kind of work up your communication plan and that stakeholder matrix early, and then also know that it's going to change. I've been on this current job for over 2 years, and in that time we've had complete turnover of some of our teams just because people move on or get promotions or whatever. So not being static in those stakeholder responsibilities is key. Another thing that a lot of the time communication breakdown comes from just a lack of sharing. Ultimately, I find that we're all in this together. If we do it on time and right, then it's going to be cheap and everyone's going to be happy. People sometimes between different parties want to keep things close to their chests, and sometimes that's not always the best. I think visibility, right? Heath is,
yeah, absolutely. I definitely, like, touch on that. I think, especially as an OEM, I've worked for other OEMs before. For whatever reason, if something's going wrong or things change, I think they want to try to maybe hide it or not, tell those things right away, because for whatever reason, they think that's going to be better. Honestly, the best thing I could say, as if you were, if you're an OEM or if you're, a design build group, make them feel comfortable where they can come talk to you about things where they're not going to get, in trouble or get sent to the principal's office or, any of those, any of the things that we don't like. As soon as something changes or something goes wrong, tell everybody, tell the people, hopefully you're having weekly meetings or, or you have a, direct communication person you can talk to, and be adaptable, be able to change and roll with things. Because I mean, Mary Frances, you can probably comment. I'm sure every project you have, when you first start off, it's exactly the same at the end, right? Nothing ever changes
Oh yeah.
in that.
Yeah. No, I think you're right there, Heath. It's bad news doesn't get better with age. The earlier that it's tabled, that, it's out in the open, then you can come up with the plan to solve it. We all know that there's going to be equipment delays or there's going to be trade shortages. There's going to be weather. There's going to be, a hurricane season that is 10 times worse than usual. There's going to be things that happen. It's construction. We're used to this. But I think it's understanding those challenges as they come up, putting them out on the table, being transparent with everyone so then you can deal with it and, come up with a plan to still meet your client's objective.
Yeah, I also see that the success is not only viewed by internal but external, right? So yes, external would be maybe the end client, but internal, right? Success is going to be, between partners, between internal groups, because those stakeholders themselves have expectations. And this whole sacred cow thing, I think we find it coming up over and over that for some reason our project needs to be us and we can't talk about it to anybody else and early on, and we're trying to really, you said, play it close to the vest. Part of what the Design Build Network is trying to do is educate, right? And we're trying to educate what design build means and also educate down to the different partners. So we all kind of feel comfortable by having this communication. I think it bodes well for everybody's needs at the end of the day.
To that point, everybody, nobody wants to send out drawings. It seems like, as an OEM, we've done entire lines where, hey, maybe there's a couple pieces we don't build and there's another OEM that builds it and they don't want to send us a drawing. We're like, we have NDAs in place, we have agreements in place. Like we don't want to steal your equipment. We just want to get this line built and get it sent out. And I think that's a big challenge that I've seen before from my side, for sure.
Yeah, we want to get that transition right at the
Exactly.
mating of the two pieces of equipment. Yeah.
Well, and drawings and schedules too, right? Every like fab shops, whatever, want to keep it close to the chest. And if we know, we can help and we can track and we can find solutions.
Yep. Absolutely. And that's one thing that we do as an OEM at the beginning of it. Once the scope is defined and everybody agrees on the schedule, we send to the design build, to the end user, whoever we're working with, we will send, hey, here's our production schedule. Here's when engineering drawings are going to be done. Here's when approval drawings are going to be done. That's a big thing for us. From the OEM side, I think we've had to wait maybe 6-7 weeks for a customer to approve a drawing. Mm-hmm. And that kills us on our timeline. So up front, we like to get that out and say, hey, you're going to see in 3 or 4 weeks, you're going to see design, a customer approval drawings, and we need those back. We try to tell them 2 weeks. The faster you can get it back, the better. I can't ever, push that out to people more. And I'm sure, Mary Frances, you do also.
Absolutely, Heath. I mean, I think that goes back to, being clear about roles and responsibilities and communicating them, because there's obligations on all sides of the partnership. There's obligations for the design builder, there's obligations for the OEMs, there's obligations for the subcontractors, the clients, and making sure that we're all rowing in the same direction, that we're all keeping up our end of the bargain to move to that goal.
Yeah. Well, we kind of, one of the things maybe we want to talk about is kind of the risk management part of it, right? Because we're talking about schedule management. That's important to all of us, because at the end of the day, it does cost, right? There's a lot of cost to that. It's not even financial, just resource cost to that. But so risk management. So what are some of the common risks you encounter in your projects, and how do you mitigate them?
Yeah, Ben, I think all risks kind of boil down to schedule risk, budget risk, or both. And You know, when we look at some of the risks that that are prevalent in the industry today, I mean, commodity lead times is a huge issue. We all kind of suffered through that with COVID,
Yeah.
and they perpetuate. You know, you're looking at, you know, switchgear, electrical components are still much longer lead time than we're all used to. So it's understanding those risks, and you know, how do you come up with a plan to still keep a project on schedule, on budget with those items. You know, we had a project last year where we started up the entire project on temp power, then took a 3-week shutdown when the switchgear finally arrived to rewire
Wow.
everything. Yeah. I mean, you're coming up with some pretty creative solutions, which I think is fun. You know, that's why we're all in this game, you know, coming up with those interesting solutions. But another risk I see is really like trade shortages, labor availability. If you
Sure.
look, you know, if you look at the trades, they're very busy, and it's a graying workforce. So that, you know, we have to get creative. Does that move the industry towards more prefabrication, skidded equipment? And I think that's, again, where, you know, defining that project plan early, getting the partners involved early can help with that. You know, understanding, hey, what do we not need to field fabricate? What can we prefab? What can we skid up to, you know, to make the process quicker? And also helping the client understand that there are going to be schedule and cost trade-offs with those risks. You know, there might be a little bit more cost in, you know, in equipment now if we're skidding equipment instead of field fabbing, but it's worth it if the risk equation, it meets the risk equation. That trade-off's worth it. So, you know, having those conversations.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I say, Ben, I know one thing,
Yeah.
you know, as an OEM for risk management, one of the things we started doing that COVID kind of forced us to do, especially when, you know, electrical parts were, you know, 6 or 7 months out, you know, as
Yeah.
we were starting to bid projects, we would look at the parts we needed, either electrical, you know, air, mechanical, and find those long lead time parts. And that would be part of our bid package. So we would say, hey, as soon as you give us a PO, these parts are going to get ordered, just so we know that we will have them in time. Because I mean, obviously it's much better now, but it's something that we started doing during COVID and we still like doing now, because we can still hit some long lead time things that we just want to make sure that from our side, all the parts are in, you know, when we're ready to put them together to keep us on schedule. So
I regret not buying a warehouse myself and filling it with those parts to jump.
Yeah, you could have made a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One that jumps out on the risk side that we deal with is a little industry specific, but obviously food quality safety is huge.
Mm.
And even just jumping back to that early planning, we've learned and learned the hard way that you from the start should have the like sequencing of your construction and your project defined, and think hard about how you're going to isolate your work. Just from a cost perspective, it's not a fun conversation to have when you're incurring a lot of costs, because you're paying for temporary walls to redo them every single week because they're getting burned down by CIP. So thinking through that hard from the start, and how you're going to build it safely from a food perspective is something that is pretty key in our industry.
Yeah, Jimmy, I think that's a great point, which people from outside the food industry or who don't operate in it don't understand that, you know, there are so many unique industry factors when it comes to sanitary design, and not just creating a sanitary detail, but being able to properly construct that detail, that you want a team that is dedicated to food and beverage. You don't want a team that, you know, built a school the day before and a big box store the day before that. You want a design build team that focuses exclusively on that sanitary design, on that food and beverage industry.
Yeah, and jumping, not just your engineering team, but your trades should be somewhat specific as well. You can't just hire any pipe fitter and expect them to know how to do sanitary welding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
all of our groups have mitigated those decisions, you know, bad decisions before, where, you know, the trade quality just wasn't there, right? And just the wrong wrong vendors were in, and we've had to go back and mitigate someone else's work, right? And it's given us opportunity to break into something typically, but you know, it's a risk for many reasons, and food safety being the biggest concern. You know, for those who are outside of the industry, food safety is so prominent for what we do, right? And there's really only a handful of companies that do this well, you know, at this level. Dennis Group being one of them, you know, of course, and Burns and Mac. I mean, because we just have a lot of experience in it, and you know, I find it brings its kind of own challenges, you know, for that kind of stuff. So, yeah, thanks for going over that. The next kind of thing we discussed we were going to talk about is some of maybe industry specific challenges, right? Being the food and bev. This is kind of my transition to that. So, what unique challenges do you face in the food and beverage industry, and how do you address them, right? I'll kind of kick that off. Maybe Jimmy, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I haven't been so lucky to get a nice greenfield job, and most of the time it's plant, and
Yeah,
your productivity factors are horrible. So trying to make sure you plan from the start for like we had to pull concrete out of the middle of the plant, and it took us 4 craft. It'd take them about a half hour to get a wheelbarrow out, just because you're wrapping it in plastic and holding the door and all that different stuff you have to do, and you forget about that from the start, and that's not just time but cost too.
Yeah.
And then coordination is key. So those things are something you're just not going to have to do if you're building a gas station or something. So knowing about those from the start and coordinating with the client and making sure the client's aware, those are going to be key, I think, to being successful.
Yeah, I think it's overall thinking about sanitary design when you're designing the process and designing kind of the facility to support the process. So making sure you've got proper circulation, pre and post kill segregation of, you know, employee flows, product flows, waste flows, designing for cleanability, designing for maintainability. All of those are so unique to food and beverage. And I mean, the risk proposition is great for our clients. You look at some of these, you know, these recall events, and a lot of them relate to poor facility design. There, you know, there are points of harborage in the facility. There's, you know, equipment that can't be maintained, drains that can't be maintained. And I mean, these are reputation killers for our client, and they're, you know, pose extreme risk to, you know, to the populace at large. So it's so important to have that sanitary design experience and understand the unique intricacies of our industry.
Yeah. She kind of mentioned the process side of things, since you're kind of down in that. What's your opinion on that, kind of some of the challenges?
I mean, you know, to the points that, you know, Mary Frances and Jimmy said too, you know, there's only a specific number, I guess, really, in my opinion, of OEMs that really work well in the food industry. You know, anybody can make, you know, a palletizer or a case packer. You know, a lot of the secondary pack areas that aren't washed down, maybe they're just wiped down. You know, some pretty easy areas to kind of work in. You know, when you get onto the primary side, and it's, you know, the product, the machine's getting washed down every night. You know, everything's wet all the time. You know, does it ever really dry? You know, really poses some specific industry challenges. So I would say, just overall, if you're, you know, design build, or even if you're a customer, you know, make sure you get an OEM that works in the food industry. And I mean, you know, like we work only in the food industry. I really would encourage people to look at OEMs that just work in the food industry. Just like design build, there's so many challenges. There's so many different things you see. You know, being up on the new technologies, the new things that you can use to put on your machine to make them more wash down. You know, everybody is really high on IP69K ratings for equipment. I think that's great, but not everything is IP69K, and not everything has to be IP69K. You know, when we were getting this call set up, I joked, whoever marketed and sent out IP69K as like the thing you have to have should be a millionaire, or needs to do ads for political purposes or something, because they have everybody convinced that if it's not IP69K, it's not wash down. And that's not true at all. You know, IP67 works good for wash downs. There's, you know, robots, motors, equipment, you know, conveyors, all those things can be washed down and still be acceptable in full wash down environment. So, having an OEM that knows what they're doing and knows what they're looking at, knows not to use certain materials because they're going to melt when you start using the caustic chemicals on them. Those are really the differences that you make. And, sometimes you don't know until you get it in, and, you're 6 months down the road. And, we had a really poor experience with a feeder system that we used from a different OEM. They swore up and down it was full wash down, it's ready to go. We looked at it, it seemed that way. And the springs they used on the feeder system couldn't hold up to the wash down. We ended up having to pull it out. So, it really, sometimes we came up with a different feeding system, but it, again, it's just being in the industry and knowing what you're looking at and knowing what you're doing makes a huge difference sometimes. So.
Yeah, because those specifications, I'm sure you see that all the time when you're going to replace equipment. They are very, not just costly for our clients, but really the time too, that downtime trying to find windows to replace it is a challenge that, getting the plan right from the beginning.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it never goes down on the day shift. It's the night shift, it's the 3 a.m. calls that, nobody wants to have. So, and then, as a design build, you guys get roped in too if, the equipment's not running, because it's everybody's problem, which it should be, but it's something you have to work through sometimes as well. So,
yeah.
It might be worth calling out, as you talk about like IP69K, but understanding early from your owner and your client what their needs and requirements are. You could have a gold standard Ferrari of a plant, but maybe that's not what you need. Maybe they aren't washing that down all that well or much, right? Or they're not too worried. And oftentimes I think we just make this assumption that you need this like amazing, perfect thing.
Yeah.
And it's expensive. It takes forever to build, and it's more than is needed. Understanding the scale is key too.
I would agree. And I would say probably most of the upfront communication we have with customers is really understanding how are they washing it down? What are they doing to it? What chemicals are they using? Because we'll get an RFQ sometimes from the design build, and it's got, like you said, Jimmy, the gold standard of what you need for wash down. And we're like, well, we can build you that, but it's got a price tag that's attached to it. And a lot of times once the customer sees that price tag, they're like, well, I mean, maybe we could, maybe we don't need all that. And that's when the real conversation starts. So.
Yeah, it really comes down to suitability of the design for the product application. What you design for dairy is going to look a whole lot different than bakery. It's going to look a whole lot different than fresh cut produce, prepared foods, ready to eat. They're all going to have their unique challenges. So it's understanding the product application and then making sure you're matching the design specifications to that particular product application.
And Mary Frances, I don't know, how does that change the building? Like if you're doing a bakery, if you're doing that, what does that look like? I guess I'm not the person to answer that, but
yeah, I mean that changes it drastically. If you have an enclosed process in a pipe, you can actually get away with much lower end finishes on a facility, versus if you have a product that is exposed to atmosphere for a long time, post-kill, pre-primary pack. Like, cereal plants are actually one of the highest care facilities from a facility design standpoint, because you have open exposed product for a long time, post-kill, pre-pack.
That's awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, I think we covered a lot of great stuff. I do want to open it up anyone who's kind of listening in. If they have access to the chat and they want to give us, ask a question, I'd sort of like to open that up to that. While I kind of give a minute for that, I do want to kind of also promote some of the upcoming, some of the series. So we do have, this is a first of the series, and this is these folks have joined us, from the panelists, myself. We're on the Design Build Network within FPSA, and so we're also going to take some different ones from some of the different series. So like on October 2nd, we have transitioning from legacy plants to smart factory, right? So we're going to get our tech groups in there. And then we got October 9th, meeting increased demands with decreased labor force. That's a great one. Data-driven on the 16th, data-driven maintenance as a margin enhancer, right? Everyone loves a margin enhancer. And then October 23rd, disaster prevention and contingency planning for operations. So I think that's a really good one. You can go to the website. It's pretty easy to find under events. That's the, fpsa.org/fall, I think it is where everything's taken away. You can just sign up and it'll send you reminders and everything else. Really don't see anyone kind of giving us questions at all. Any of you guys want to add anything else before we kind of close it out?
I think a lot of good conversation here. We talked about this in various different answers, but I think the communication, the transparency, the visibility is one thing that we really want to hit on. When we're talking about design build, having that kind of total one-stop shop, and that combined team of everyone working towards the end goal. I think that's where we all feel that design build is better for our clients, is the right solution for our industry.
Yeah,
I'd say our industry is uniquely painful and frustrating. It can hurt, but there's also a lot of reward, and it's pretty cool to go home and tell people you make pizza rolls or something for a living. So as long as you keep that up and we keep open dialogue, and I think it's fast and you got to be on your feet, and as long as you do that, you can be successful.
Yeah. Well, Ben, it looks like Karen might have a question. I think she has.
She's raised her hand, but I don't see how I can get to the question part of it unless we let her talk, which I don't know if I personally have access to be able to do that. We can get some help there. Maybe we can allow her to talk. That'd be great. And there we go. Karen, you've been brought on.
Yeah, hey. I tried to do the chat and it says the chat's disabled, so I figured I'd raise my hand.
Well, we got you talking.
Okay, good. I just had a question because I'm in design build as well, and we still have our clients use the terminology quote turnkey. And I know that's not really something that, I don't know, anybody does at this point. And I wonder what your experience is with, how you're talking to your clients about design build versus what maybe their expectation might be of turnkey.
Yeah, that's a great question.
That is, Karen. I think it's a mentality change, in my opinion. Is when I think of turnkey, I think of, the owner throws it over the fence to the design builder catches it, and then at the end says, oh, here's your plant that I built you, where it's not a partnership. I think the big difference between turnkey and design build is that partnership, is that open communication, is making sure you have all the key stakeholders involved, so we're really making the decisions together. We're evolving the design together. We're traveling through this journey together, instead of just, okay, here you go. That I think is really the difference.
I think turnkey is also just a good marketing word. It sounds great, right? Especially if you're if you're an equipment guy, it makes it sound like turnkey. Like we're gonna show up one day and we're gonna bring this line in and you guys can turn it on. It's good, right?
Press the go
Drop
button.
Absolutely. I think from our perspective, I think we hear turnkey a lot because I don't feel like people have the engineering resources that they used to.
100%,
it seemed like the industry, maybe 10, 15 years ago, a lot of end users had their own engineering group that could kind of come to an OEM and say, hey, here's what we want, or we need something like this, and they could draw it up. But I feel like nowadays, in the last maybe 5 years, it seems like nobody as an end user really has much engineering, or if they do, they're so enamored with all these projects that they can't get one of them done. So I think maybe that's where people really want turnkey. But to your point, Mary Frances, they don't really know what they mean when they say turnkey. I think they just want help.
Yeah.
Then
they probably want help with everything. Yeah.
They know what they want, right? They need to give that input, even if they don't have as much engineering or anything, but they are passionate and they care. And that's why it's not just turnkey. You need the feedback and that partnership.
Yeah. Also, I think turnkey could be, in their mind, meaning something like, if you say you are turnkey, meaning I can bring all parties together. Like I'll take on the responsibility of bringing all the parties together, which is a critical role for some organizations, and that's perfectly fine. It's just who takes the lead on it, right?
Yeah.
Well, they also can't just walk away too. I think a lot of people want to, like you said, Mary Frances, just hand it off and like you can deliver this piece and turn it on in my shop. That'd be great.
Yeah.
You need a lot more input than that
Yeah.
from them.
Yeah. I think what they're saying is they want single source. They want, they want
Single
one source of
source, yeah.
responsibility, which I think is valid. And that is a lot of reasons why a
course.
client would hire a design builder. So you have that single point of responsibility. But yeah, I think what they don't mean is they want involvement in the project still.
Yeah. About 50% of our business as an A&E firm is design build, and the other is design bid, right? And I think design bid, some folks, I find it's more of the larger companies because they feel like they need to get those 3 bids out there, and it's more of a procurement process for them. I find the ones that are a little bit smaller, right, tend to lean toward design build because they know just one team has it, right? This team can do it. And that's, we do both, but we prefer design build, honestly, at the end of the day, right? Because we're all in early, we're all communicating early. It's just, it makes it, and it has cost benefits, plus and minus for everybody. So it's about level of comfort, I would say, for all that. And to tout the groups again, this is the design build network. Anyone who's listening would like to join the network. There's no cost to this. It's just being part of a proactive group that helps communicate and educate the industry. It's also a great part of a leadership tool for yourselves to get involved, and you can be involved in a lot of networks. So you don't have to be just that. There's young professionals, there's tech, there's safety, there's I think of Women's Alliance. So there's a lot of great, and they each do a lot of good stuff. So and Karen, thanks for that question. That was really appropriate for everything. So with that, I guess we can just wrap it up. I think we had a great conversation. We solved the world's problems, which was the key takeaway for today. But again, we want to thank all our panelists, right? We got Keith and Mary Frances and Jimmy. Appreciate all you guys. But today was also sponsored by Burns McDonald. And so just lastly, thanks for attending. You may receive a customer survey kind of thing, a survey after this. We appreciate you filling that out. Just to give some feedback, things we can maybe possibly change. And also we encourage you to sign up for future webinars just like this. And you'll probably find this out in the internet somewhere after the fact if you ever want to get to review it or send it to a friend. So again, thanks everybody for being here today, and hopefully I get you some of your time back for the rest of the day.
Thank you.
So thanks a
Thank
lot.
you all.
Thanks.
Yeah.